Good morning, I'm Loran, Steinlage, West Union, Iowa, here in Bismarck, North Dakota, to speak about what we're doing on our farm. We're in transition to more of a regenerative practices. We're doing from a traditional corn to now we're corn, soybeans, wheat, rye, barley, buckwheat, and we're doing companion cropping, relay cropping, and trying to figure out how to bring livestock back in the operation eventually. We started out with interseeding corn, and we can document 15 bushel an acre gain, and through my travels now I've met a few other farmers that can show the same numbers across the world. And on the relay cropping, I'm not afraid to say our most profitable acres this year were the relay soybeans into cereal rye, where we are netting more dollars, spending less to get ultimate yield.
And why did you agree to share that with people here today?
I guess I'm fortunate enough. I've learned a long time ago, the more I share, the more people share, and just the networking opportunity to be here with a great list of speakers is worth it to me.
I'm going to start out telling a little story here. I was going to save it till a little later in the presentation. A lot of you have had the chance to meet my son, Roland. Little known fact, or well-known fact, I guess by now, is that he had a brain tumor back in 2009. To keep his mind going, I made a list of 10 of the top people I was following. And I asked if he would, good thing you're here. I asked if he would study them people, to pay attention to them people, to learn. That's how we kept his mind going. Well, the neat part is, last night at the speaker meeting, over 5 of the people on that list of 10 were in that meeting. So it's when we talk about consistency in that, a lot of these people have been at it a long time, and I'm just dang proud to be here to represent with you guys. So what I'm going to talk about today is I usually try to talk about adaptation versus adoption, and I'm going to combine it with timelines today. So in the first picture here, this is a picture of my interseed cover crop field from last year. If you look real close here, I got to get dialed in here, red button. Come on. We've got interseed cover crop here in between the corn rows. That is kind of where I started, trying to figure out how to make things work on my farm. We started this back in 2006. So we've progressed quite over through the years. This spring I was at a meeting, and a guy brought up the Satiri model, and it really started clicking to me where we need to be as we start to enter some of these new frontiers in farming. You know, most of us are right here, status quo. If you can, I hope you can all read it. It looks like it's pretty good size. You know, this is our traditional farming operation. As we go through time, though, we're going to keep having these ebbs and flows. What I want to talk today about is how to minimize the ebbs and flows a little bit. So, but I'm going to, you know, where I'm at in northeast Iowa is right here on the edges of the driftless area, as he said. We have, on average, about 140 days of growing season a year. So it's not quite as short as you guys here, but you can see the diversity in Iowa alone. When I go to meetings in Iowa, everybody's like, down in southwest Iowa, it's like, it's cold and wet here, but you know, we lose a full month just in about 300 miles. And for relevance here, South Dakota line would be straight west of me on the, I think it's the 43rd latitude is where I'm at. And this slide kind of shows we're right here in this little nook. The only way I can describe what kind of soils we have is we're right where the glaciers took a dump. We have, on my home farm, in a mile-long row, we have 25 different soil types. We can go from anywhere from pure gravel to pure peat. So everything I do on my farm has to be very adaptable. We got to make it work on every acre. So that is kind of the buildup of how we've evolved into our system. First thing I'm going to talk about is our family. I like to bring our family in to help you to understand how our cropping system has evolved. This is my wife, Brenda, sitting over here. The 2 daughters, you know, I'll call my wife soybeans. The daughters are wheat and rye, and then Roland's going to be barley. But throughout life, you're going to experience a lot of ups and downs. Throughout your farming career, you're going to experience a lot of ups and downs. This is me in 1993. I was monocrop corn. I looked pretty dang good there. I was high maintenance, but trust me, I was, you know, you've met my wife. I married up. It took a lot. But My journey started back in 1980. I'm going to back up to 1983 now. I was hit broadside by a semi. Took scar over 10 years, scar tissue started building up. That indirectly changed my whole career. I love hearing about how to bring livestock back in my farming operation, but I cannot be around livestock anymore. I can pick up livestock disease, so that's a hurdle I've had to deal with all my life, or the last 20-some years. But that's the day the last cows were on our dairy farm milking cows. So about every time I figure out where I'm at in the world, I've had to reinvent myself, trying to figure out where we're going next. So as we've evolved through the regeneration nation here, change is nothing new to me. As we started diversifying, when the livestock left, I started pushing custom work harder and harder and harder. At one point, that baler was averaging 13,000 bales a year just doing custom work. I was putting 800 hours a year on a tractor. I didn't understand what family was anymore. Thankfully, 2008, my wife convinced me to go on my first vacation. We'd been married for a couple of years by then. Was it 13? My math is off a little today, but honeymoon and everything was the first vacation. So thank God she convinced me that there's more to life than farming. Because fast forward, January 2009, we had a train wreck again. Just like my life, it's been up and down. Son Rollin ended up in Iowa City, Iowa, brain tumor. We were told he pretty much had a 20% chance to live. My only outlet during that time frame was social media. When you're locked in a hospital with nurses and doctors, it's fun, but I had to start reaching out. I had somewhat of an online presence at that time, but I started figuring out the only way I could communicate with the outside world was through social media. And through the next couple of years, we kept reaching out, and the circle kept getting bigger. I started figuring out the more I share, the more people share. So as you're looking around this room today, if you don't have a peer network, take the time to talk to the people at your table, and then at dinner time, jump to another table. Start meeting people, start sharing ideas. That's how you're going to fast forward your progress. And back to the family situation, this is where we're at. I think this was Christmas this past year. As you can see, we're starting to drag a few more diversity into our family. I don't know what we're going to call them. One of them is going to be buckwheat, but I don't know which one yet. And, last summer, we were honored with the Iowa Environmental Leadership Award. It's one of the highlights of my life. Sad part is, we came home that day to this. We all talk about infiltration rates, rainfall simulators, all this stuff. This is 100 feet south, or a couple hundred feet south of my field, our home farm there. What I really like to point out to the people on this is the fence line is right here, and the creek flows that way. We had 21 inches of rain in 7 days. This is the water that was coming off of my waterways. So as we test our system, we can watch it live some days. One of the best things we figured out early in the game is we can start adapting cover crops into our system to help make that work. That's how we're able to have them pictures like that. My neighbor is a full tillage guy. I get a couple tons of soil from him every year. My biggest problem this year, we had double our normal rainfall. I've heard rumors we've had up to 70 inches of rain this year. I was talking to a guy last night, that's rainfall or rainforest status. I don't know if we're there yet. We don't have that many trees, but we're getting close. But when I look at this chart, what I see missing usually is productivity. We all like talking cover crops, but how many of us truly figure out how to put dollar figures to the cover crops? So that's where, when I seen the bill for how this meeting came together, I love talking about, a lot of our speakers are going to talk companion crop, relay cropping and that. And that's what I enjoy. That's where I see our operation going. Yes, I use cover crops, but on my operation, I truly don't know their cover crops until about June 1st, I'm going to say roughly. I got done seeding last week. Everybody's like, well, what'd you seed? And I'm like, well, wheat, rye, and barley. They're like, is that your cover crops? I was like, well, I'll tell you about June, because my intent is they're all probably going to be relay acres. But we'll see how Mother Nature hand unfolds next spring, and that's when we'll decide, as spring progresses, we're going to keep adapting our plan to Mother Nature. And part of the learning I've done over the years has been due to our greenhouse. And early in the greenhouse days, we started paying attention to the companion gardening, thanks to a few friends. And the old Three Sisters thing came up early in the game. We started talking about that. I hear a lot of people talk about nowadays, so I'm not going to spend much time about it. But in our greenhouse, one of the first things we started doing is we tried the Three Sister project. Dreams can become nightmares. You ever had plants that are only supposed to be 12 feet tall end up, the peak of the greenhouse is 18 feet tall? This stuff works, folks. I mean, but what I really want to show on this slide is companion gardening. Our gardeners have most of this stuff figured out. You know, last night I was talking to Jimmy Eamons there, and we started talking about indicator plants. We can run all the tests we want, but Mother Nature, if you start understanding some of this stuff, Mother Nature is telling us what wants to grow on our farm. You know, we just need to start picking apart what plants are growing, why they're growing, and figuring out why they're there. How can we learn from that and use it to adapt our cropping systems? The other thing I really started learning, when the greenhouse was in full production, at one point they hauled 70,000 pounds of tomatoes out of that greenhouse. It's less than a quarter acre, or 1/10 of an acre, I believe. And the interesting thing I learned early in the greenhouse was for every ton of fertilizer we hauled in, we were hauling out 3 to 4 tons of dry matter produce. Now, university likes talking removal rates and that. Can somebody tell me where that other 2 to 3 ton is coming from? It's a sterile environment. We're growing in coconut hulls. The only thing getting provided is water, sunlight, and a ton of fertilizer. So when we talk removal rates, where did them numbers come from? I don't have the answers. I'm asking a question here. By the time, if I get through everything today, we're going to leave you with more questions I'm probably going to answer. So, but that brings us back to this change model. You know, I showed you already how, if you go back through the timeline here, 2002, we were kind of status quo as our farm started changing. We had the dip where we kind of, our family took a crash. We started going into the cover crops. We had a little bit of dip. But the biggest thing we figured out is how to minimize these waves. And the biggest thing I want to emphasize is when we talk about cover crops and that, what's the biggest excuses a lot of people have why they can't use cover crops? Number one, we don't have time. Number two, we don't have money. And the third thing I'd like to add is too many people try to swing for the fences when they're starting down a system. You need to start with your goals in a zone that's attainable. Yes, set them high, but set them in a range where you can afford to lose. You can go to meetings and hear all the high numbers and all that, but you got to bring reality back to the system. And that's what I'm just, I can't reiterate this enough. We've got to figure out how to, and sharing knowledge is probably the simplest way to go about it. Which, now we're going to move on to the actual farming operation. We started seeing what was going on in our farm. I started seeing rootworms. When the cows left and all that, I went hard corn on corn. That was our only option in Northeast Iowa. That's what common sense would tell you. We can pay bills. Right now, land rent is $300 an acre in my neighborhood. It takes a pretty good cropping system or mindset to pay the bills. So I started looking how we can interject. Everybody's talking diversity. That's why I focused on our corn and corn operation. We started interseeding. There is a couple years ago when I really, that's when I figured we kind of had the system down pat. And as, we started figuring things out, I hear these guys in Dakotas talking about soil armor. Well, as I said earlier, we're up to 70 inches of rain this year, I believe. So my adaptation is I want a living soil armor. Everything I want to plant green as much as possible. I mean, we're getting to the point now, even in the fall, our fall grains, we're planting green. Instead of totally terminating cover crops, we're suppressing them to maintain that living root that we all hear so much about. Hopefully, if I get time here, we're going to show you how that's working on our operation. What it does for me is it resilience to extreme temperatures, extreme to moisture, provides shelter to livestock above and below ground. But the biggest realization I had this year is, oh, by the way, I had to realize Iowa was traditionally a swamp. So when we talk about farming in nature's image, I got to remember that we are dealing in what was originally a swamp. We call it tall grass prairie, but there's a reason pretty much everything in my area was pattern tiled. And we started out with the corn on corn. We added first thing easy would add soybeans. That's commonly grown in our area. I hate them, but they pay, now that I've figured out how to add the rye, barley, and wheat to it, we can start making the cash flow to compete with 200 to 250 corn. And early in the game, I figured out, as I started bringing the small grains back in, I cannot just have a small grain to pay $300 an acre rent. So that's when we started looking at the relay. I was watching a friend of mine in Wisconsin, John Coots, and then I had a friend out in Nebraska that I tagged up with. They were both kind of about 10 years ago already. They started figuring out the relay wheat and rye, or wheat and soybeans. Now I've taken it upon myself. Cereal rye works good in my system. So we push cereal rye pretty hard. I doubt we're going to get time today to tell you how far we're taking some of this, but we're starting to look at a grazing option to bring my daughters. I have 2 daughters now that want to come back to the farming operation. So we're trying to figure out avenues how to bring them back in the operation. But as we go down the path here, one of the best tools I found early in the game was a rainfall simulator. I don't know how many of you are brave enough to put your soil on the rainfall simulator, but I call it the old Jesus test. And you can ask Rick Bernard back there. I keep lobbying. If you win the rainfall simulator, I want a free year at the NRCS. No holds barred. Just give me a free pass for a year. Because if we can win that every year consistently, we should be doing a pretty good job. And back to this. This is one of the first time my soil was on this. This was our early interseeding versus my front lawn versus my neighbor's tilt dirt. And the first thing we seen very early in the game is our water holding capacity. Granted, these jugs aren't going to probably show up the best here, but this is my interseeding. What I want you to notice is there's only 1/3 of the water in the jugs. Every other one, either the front jug was full or the back jug was full. We held over 1/3 of the moisture on a rainfall simulator. And now every time Neil Sass runs mine on, we can pretty much consistently do that every time. So when you're talking extreme weather conditions, we are doing exactly what they say we should be doing. This was last year at my field day. At my field day, we charged a little bit. So I'd like to say we had what I'd call a very experienced crowd. And when they flipped them pans, was the biggest reaction I ever seen. When you hear 175 people gas. And like I said, it was an experienced crowd. They paid $100 if I remember right to come. They're serious. But everybody describes the black chocolate cake. These two are, one's a relay field, one's just a delayed termination field. And the other is my neighbor's in between. I think you can tell which one's mine. But through our interseeding field that was corn on corn, one of the things we started noticing is I did a deal at Borlaug the other year, and they had a gal talking about restored native prairie and how they're restoring native prairie. So we started paying attention to one of our corn on corn fields that I started with the interseeding. And 5-year restored native prairie, we're on par with a 8-year corn on corn rotation, if I remember right. So we're basically matching native prairie with corn on corn with the interseeding in it. And this is true prairie over here. And but I keep telling everybody the thing I want to start paying attention to is the organic carbon level on that field. Now, we did our Haney test last year, did PFLA last year. With the way this year went, all testing got pulled. I mean, we didn't run the test. Plus, I'll be honest, last year what I seen on some of the tests had me confused. We've been trying to retrace that, trying to figure out exactly where we're at, because I think we had sampling error, but some days life happens and tests get pulled. What I really like to show to people is this is the actual test, the PETA soil that we took the test on. What I really want you to draw attention to is right here. Our soil is so active that it was bubbling, and it hadn't rained for a week or two. Now, y'all hear the Slovita test or stuff like that. I'd say if we're bubbling off carbon dioxide, I think we're pretty good. It's that old power of observation. Some days you can run a test, but some days you just got to be aware and look what's around you. And there's just another, we were 78% stable soil aggregates, on at least a 5-year corn-on-corn permaculture. But we didn't just start yesterday. You know, this is, my dad always loved this picture. 2006, we're digging tile, and he always called this tiger striping. We had carbon streaking going down in the soil about 4 or 5 feet already back in 2006. You know, fast forward to 2016, Joe Clapperton, we've got inch carbon streaks going 4 to 5 feet in the soil. And I don't think I'm going to play. Everybody says cover crops, keep your ground colder, keep it wetter. These videos are on YouTube, so look up my YouTube channel. What we show here is on the left, we have a meager cover crop stand. On the right, my neighbor no-till ripped. And then if you play the video, it shows it's about 10 degrees warmer on the cover crop side. And this is all done, this is backed up with data from our NRCS. They had temperature data loggers buried out there. Shows that essentially our cover crop was warmer. And then about the time the corn canopied, we went cooler. And then as soon as the corn broke canopy with the interseed, we went back warmer. There's a long story short on that. And just to show how accurate, it's just a $200 camera that plugs in your iPhone. That's the coffee maker in my house. That's our in-floor heat. Usually I like to put a picture of my wife on here, but she's here today. If the great sales pitch is tell your wife she's hot, she'll let you buy one. Like I said, it's just a simple little plug in on your cell phone, about $200 I think they're down to now, just FLIR.com, F-L-I-R. But next segment I want to talk about is lasting repercussions, and as we bounce across the country, I keep going across the Oregon Trail. Now we all say time heals wounds. That's the Oregon Trail. When's the last time a wagon train was down there? Takes a lot of time to heal stuff. But if you're paying attention and observing, this is my home farm in 1930. Went back on satellite maps and we found the maps. What I want you to pay attention to is this little triangle. You know, and I got to give credit to Jamie Scott, Cameron Mills, and Jill Clapperton for kind of triggering this thought. You know, they started seeing where they could tell where buckwheat fields were 30 years ago. So I started paying attention to our aerial maps, and this one sticks out like a sore thumb, this little triangle. 1940, there's that little triangle showing up if you look close. 1950, still, you can tell we're starting to consolidate. My dad moved here in 69, so we can't take credit or blame for any of this until 69. But there's that triangle showing up again. 1960s, for some reason that triangle's showing up again. 1980s, there's that little triangle. I mean, here you can start to tell the whole farm was pattern tiled. You can start to tell a lot of things, but for some reason, I'd love to figure out how to go back to 1930 if our NRCS has records that far back and figure out what the cropping rotation or what happened. Here we are, 80-some years later, and it still shows up. 2011, it's still showing up. I thought I had a more recent one, but another thing that's been a big influence on our farming operation is we're all controlled traffic. And I like to tell everybody drones are going to help sell controlled traffic, like pattern tile help sell, or yield maps help sell pattern tile. Take the time as you're having guys fly your fields with drones and pay attention to your traffic. There's stuff going on out there that you can see, and part of me wonders that last series of slides, if that's not what we're seeing some, because you can tell over the years now, our fields are getting more traffic, the same pattern, get more consistency. I got to give Derek credit. Everybody wonders why we run our tracks and our tires backwards. Traditionally, your tires, to maintain our tram lines, your tires are put on to push the soil out so they get a fresh bite. If you're trying to maintain tram lines long term, we reason that if you put them on backwards, they squeeze the soil in and they help maintain your tram line. We've got tram lines that have been in place for over 10 years. We're getting a little depression there, but it's not too bad. But the main reason I wanted to keep this segment in here for this, we're starting to notice all our fields are getting corrugated. Now, I don't think we have anybody from the Delta here today, but early when I was learning, I was going to the Delta, pay attention down there, and you see all their fields are corrugated. Granted, they're doing it with tillage, but the main reason they do that is, number one, for drainage, and number two, it helps raise that root up out of the soil, helps with drainage. through 10 years of controlled traffic, with them plants basically being in that same 4-inch band, we're getting our soil to start heaving up. Our fields are getting corrugated. I'll put it this way, you can go 15 mile an hour in our rows, but if you try going across our rows, it's like driving over chisel plowing. The other thing, you seen the root pit what Jill Clapper did the other year. This is right where the root pit was. The same day we were noticing that, we started noticing right where that root pit is, we have a depression. The only way, and it's to the point, it's a full 8-inch depression. Every piece of soil went back into that root pit when we closed it up, but now a year later, we have an 8-inch depression right where that is. The only thing I can figure out is it's soil collapse. We all talk about building air infiltration into our soils and that. It's pretty visual when you start looking at this. I mean, that's the following spring, that same root pit. I mean, you can tell the exact outline of it even. No water ran off the rest of that field, but we had water ponding right where the root pit is. So that little soil disturbance can ruin it in a hurry. And if I was playing my videos today, I'd love to show you this one, but this is that same field this spring. We planted a full month later, and we probably, at this point, I think we had about 25, 30 inches of rain in the planting season. You can notice my track is pretty shiny. But thanks to that corrugation, if you look here real close, we've got a 4-inch band right where I'm planting. The dust was actually rolling and the water is flying off my tracks. Most people would probably think that wasn't that smart, but that was about the 4 hours that day we had to plant that field. My neighbors planted 3 weeks later. I don't know if his corn even black layered this year. But now we're going to talk a little about the interseeding, and I'm going to yield to Jeremy Wilson on this quite a bit today, but what we're doing is nothing new. When I started paying attention to interseeding, we started getting books from 1900. I know Mike Henderson is here today. We were at one of his meetings, and somebody went in the library and brought out 10 books that we had all paid attention to, and he's like, these guys are right. It's all there. We just got to look back and find some of the information. And what I like to emphasize here is, as you go down this path, you got to start with a vision. A lot of failure comes from people going off half-cocked and say, hey, we're going to try this, but they don't have a good hard plan in place. Pay attention to the people that are tweaking. Ignore the ones that are just, hey, yep, we tried this, didn't work. Oh, we tried that, it worked. Okay, but we're going to do that. Just be careful on who you're watching, paying attention to. I'm not going to stand here today and try to tell you exactly what to do here. I'd have to come and kind of talk to you, see what you're doing. I know what works in West Union, Iowa, but I'll defer to Jeremy for the North Dakota version. But this is the 10th interseeder that we built. You can tell we got pretty complicated. That's the stands we can achieve now in interseeding on a very consistent basis. Now, I know a lot of people are struggling with timing. Everybody wants to talk timing. I can't say this is exact timing, but according to the forecast, and that's when we hit go time. Usually I'd like to play this video. We run 10, 12 mile an hour all day interseeding. And this is just a quick show or tell what we kind of do. We're getting that diversity built into that corn on corn. Here already we're starting one's a broadleaf mix, one's a grass mix. And like I said, I'm going to kind of breeze through this. What you can see in this picture is this is kind of when we hit senescence. But what I really want you to pay attention to is we're using a herbicide band on all our corn. And basically we're I won't say we're terminating in the row. We're putting a residual on the row, but in between the row, we're going for more of a suppression. And that's next year. We're set up probably better than ever for some of that for next year. But this is what I like to see after harvest. Now I wish I had. I've offered free grazing for the last 5 years. To date, I've got no takers. So if anybody wants to haul cows to Iowa, a couple hundred acres is free grazing usually. And that's a mere week later. That's how fast, once you break that canopy, if you got the cover crop in there, how many of you guys would love to have that available in the fall? And everybody asks how do we put together our mixes? We're not very scientific. I focus on cool season legumes and brassicas and our corn on corn. Corn going to beans, I focus on the cool season grasses. But I love having a legume in there. and we'll do a controlled burn. So like in the fall, soon, now we're switching more to summer legumes instead of using the winter legumes and terminating them. We're going in with summer legumes. We're kind of switching things up here. Beans going to corn. We're starting to get that figured out. I mean, I had a beautiful surprise last week. I'm sorry I don't have any pictures of that. We just learned Saturday that we actually have interseeding from 2017 showing up in my beans after harvest. And when we harvested most of the soybeans, you couldn't see anything there because that clover and that was right under the litter on the soil surface. But then we get a rain and it popped, and I got 400 some acres. I've got clover in between the rows, and I already know we're going to plant in between the rows, so I'm looking forward to next spring. Timing-wise, everybody gets hooked on stages. I'm more of watch the forecast and watch what Mother Nature's handing you. Everything I do is based on V4. Up here, I'm going to say you're going to probably be in the V1, V2, but be watching that forecast. If you're in a hot, fast growing season, push. If it's a cold, traditional season like we've had the last couple years, take your time. You can probably wait till V4 like I would. But, it's all timing. Figuring out how to get that in there. You've got to get it established so when that corn canopies, it goes dormant, but it's strong enough to survive the dormancy period. I think most of you guys probably heard of Richard Bieber Farms. I borrowed this slide from him because it's just simple. When you're picking your mixes, feel free to go crossways. If you're going to go sideways or lateral, he's got the caution or stop signs there. Be careful when you're starting to go warm season grasses, warm season, your cash crop, there's smarter people on that. But like I said, I just threw that in because I like to caution people. You can set up for disaster pretty easy. And this slide, this just kind of shows the diversity that we've introduced mostly in the corn-on-corn operation since 2006. We're over 20-some different plants just on the corn-on-corn side. Now we're adding the wheat, rye, barley, all that stuff, buckwheat, and we're turning them into cash crops. And we've established the late season option, but now we got to start figuring out, I want that green as long as possible. So here what we're going to talk about is our spring options now a little bit. Last year we had the unique learning opportunity that Mother Nature gave us that wet spring again, and we had cereal rye that did not want to die. We hit it with gramoxone, we hit it with Roundup. It was non-GMO corn, so we were kind of out of options. And last couple of years, I've been trying to build the in-row roller. We had failure, but one night, when you got 200 acres laying there, you can't see the corn rows anymore, and anybody that's played with cereal rye and corn knows that they're not very good friends. You can tell the corn row is here already, but at 2 o'clock one morning, it hit me. When I was testing, I had the right pieces. I just had them in the wrong order. So went out 6 hours later, the drill rolled out of the shop, ready to roll. That was kind of the first maiden voyage. Fast forward to this year, all my soybeans pretty much look like this. Another one of the videos, I'd play this, but we've got cereal rye and buckwheat in soybeans, and there's what the soybeans, they're in there about like that high. Now, my goal is to maximize carbon. Now, my friends in Pennsylvania on the East Coast, they wait to plant because their cereal rye starts growing. Mine doesn't start growing until about June 1st. If I remember right, this is about June 15th when our cereal rye finally headed out for senescence. And now just a quick touch here on some of our relay cropping tweaks for 2018. We've been running twin row, the same drill we interseed. We twin row drill, but last year I had the option to work with LaForge. They were wanting to build a hitch to do some of what we're working on. And fast forward to this winter, I found that hitch on Twitter, tried to get a hold of a guy, wouldn't respond through the peer network. A friend of mine calls me in March and said, hey, that hitch is for sale on eBay. $900 later, it's in my shed. Not thinking we were going to use it this year, but then my seed showed up this year, under 2,000 seeds per pound. Well, anybody that's run a Montauk knows you don't want to run soybeans. We can run 3,400 seeds per pound soybeans through a Montauk, get pretty good results. But if we try running 2,000 seeds per pound through a Montauk, they claim I can do it with the new Gen 2, but I don't have the Gen 2 yet. We're running with the Gen 1 yet. So out came an old IH 900 corn planter. We modified the hitch and all that quick. Boom, we're doing our relay cropping. And then fast forward, this is another video that this is planting the relay beans into twin row wheat. But the way the spring was unfolding, ended up I did all my interseeding with the same drill this year. And that was kind of the goal 2 years ago when we started working with LaForge. I told him I wanted to get to the point where we can plant our cash crop, we can do our relay crop, we can do our interseed, everything on a budget. So now, granted the 900 planter is not ideal, but we've got a tool that can do everything for under $5,000. So everybody says we can't afford to do this stuff. Keep working, figuring ahead how we're going to make this stuff happen. This is harvesting the relay soybeans into wheat. We went ultra simple this year. I had been using John Coots's block guards, but my biggest problem is we're in pretty rough terrain, and I do not like metal out in front of a sickle bar. Most of you guys run combines. Metal and combines don't get good. So we improvised this year. This is version 1. This was a quick and dirty version. Most of you recognize that as drain tilage, or drain tile. We just cut foot-long sections, clip them on the cutter bar. They hold themselves in place. We got about 50 acres through that, and we started beating them up. We've revised them now, but for you guys thinking about trying some of this, this is an easy, simple option. You can get a few acres out of them if you're not beating them up. Next step we started pushing on is when we start talking the relay companion. This was last year. We didn't, due to late year this year, we didn't have time, but here's another video. The day the cereal rye left the field, the soybeans are in there already, and we drilled buckwheat into the soybeans. Now, Jonathan Lundgren tomorrow will probably talk about the beneficial insects and that stuff. Buckwheat is phenomenal when it comes, all my soybeans this year had buckwheat in them. We used no fungicide, no insecticide, and we matched yields with my neighbors. Oh, by the way, mine were food-grade soybeans, so we're building a system that cash flows. But this is just a few quick slides. Shows the buckwheat into the soybeans. We've already pulled, we pulled 30 bushel cereal rye off of there last year. We've got a nice crop of soybeans and a nice crop of buckwheat in there now. This just shows the progression through the year here. About 6 weeks, we got flowering. And what I want you to pay attention to here, everybody wonders timing on some of this stuff. Yes, I say it's critical, but the neat part here is, up here, the soybeans were unaffected in harvest. Right here where we pulled into the field, we smashed the soybeans down, delayed them some. Notice how the buckwheat matured with the soybeans up here, but where the beans are delayed, the buckwheat is delayed. So back again, Mother Nature takes good care of us on some of this stuff. She makes us look smart some days. But that's fast forward last fall, combining the buckwheat and the soybeans together, and we just run them through a grain cleaner. Everybody wants to hear cash flows and that stuff, so here's the quick and dirty cash flow. I like to talk break-evens. I can throw out some high numbers, but how many of you guys can grow 30 bushel rye? How many of you guys can grow 30 bushel soybeans? Oh, by the way, we had 400 pounds of buckwheat in there. When I threw that slide together, corn was 410. So that's 200 bushel an acre corn. What's my expenses on this stuff? I got Ben Run soybeans, Ben Run buckwheat, Ben Run cereal rye, no herbicide. And this year we got offered a malt barley contract, so last minute we hurry up and threw malt barley in there. Got $8 a bushel, 50 bushel malt barley. I was just estimating 30 bushel, but we ended up with 50 bushel food-grade soybeans. So you can adjust that cash flow accordingly. Seed cost, $24 an acre. That field we did hit with 2,4-D early. We did hit it with Select the day we harvested the small grain. Take out some of the foxtail, and that was peaking. But it's a very cost-efficient operation. The wheat, soy, same thing. Now, I'm not afraid to tell anybody my most profitable acres this year, and I'm going to bet was the most profitable acres in Fayette County, Iowa, was one of these fields. We harvested 50 bushel food-grade soybeans and 30 bushel cereal rye off of it. Our expenses was zero, other than Ben Run and our time and labor. And we need to be thinking, as farmers, we get paid to manage and run equipment. We don't get Christmas cards from the co-ops. We don't get Christmas cards from John Deere. I do remember a time when John Deere did send me a Christmas card, but I was in pretty good debt to them, so I'd rather not be that way. But we can talk cash flows all we want, but this is a map that helps me sell the whole thing. A couple years ago, Iowa Soybean Association wanted me to be involved, and this is one of our early relay fields. This whole field of corn was 234 bushel an acre. This green strip was our relay field. Now, I think these figures are off a little bit, but no matter how you tweak the figures, it's still almost 25% better return on investment for that relay field than 234 bushel an acre corn. Why is it a hard sell? I mean, it's an easy sell for me. I mean, essentially every acre I seeded this fall could potentially be a relay. I'm not going to decide that, as I said earlier, until January or June 1st. So this summer I had the fortune of Chris Nichols being at my farm, and I know we're getting close to the end of time here. I'm trying to honor that. This is the last series of slides, but she triggered a thought that your average corn bean farmer, your corn and beans are actually sinking carbon. Was it 10 weeks out of 104 weeks, a 2-year cycle? So essentially 10% of the time, we all talk we're sinking carbon. Well, this is just kind of, I did a quick and dirty here. Here's your months. You know, the sun is supposed to represent your peak carbon period. So out of that 3 cropping seasons, we got a grand total of 15 weeks we're sinking carbon. We're doing good, eh? Okay, we had cereal grain, a winter grain. Now all of a sudden we expand that window a little bit because, correct me if I'm wrong here, it's when it's in its vegetative state is when you're sinking carbon. So that peak period when your plant's pretty good size and good, before it starts flowering, you're sinking carbon. Now we add the soybeans back in. Oh, by the way, now we're going to add buckwheat in there. And then we got the volunteer cover crop, and then we let that overwinter. We're going to delay terminate it in spring. And then our corn crop comes in there. That's only got that 6-week period again, but we're putting that interseed cover crop in there again. So we're filling that gap, delay terminating that, or we're actually getting to the point where we're just trying to suppress it. And then we follow up with either a corn or soybean crop again. And then last Saturday, I had to hurry up and throw this slide in there. All of a sudden, yeah, it's getting a little mixed up here, but I'm dang proud of this one. We've got interseed cover crop surviving with a living root from June 2017 all the way, it should I'm pretty confident it's going to overwinter. We're going to be there next spring, and I'm going to suppress that. My goal is suppression, and we're not going to terminate that. So when we talk keeping that living root in the soil, we can do it. We just got to think different and make it happen. So with that, I'm going to leave you with a little homework. I got 2 videos I really like to play if I have time, but we're short today. Everybody wonders where I'm coming from a lot of time, what I'm thinking about. Take the time to, here's a book, or if you're like me, you like to watch videos. The Innovator's Dilemma. They talk about where we are as business and how you go to the next level. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time. This is your homework. You can learn it. If you're looking it up on YouTube, look for this video. The other one I want to leave you with is a TED Talk. We as farmers need to figure out our relevance. How many of you have heard the manufactured meat, the lab meats, the processed foods and that coming out? And I'm sure some of you are going to talk today about the nutrient density that a lot of us are pushing for. Watch this video, and if you understand it like I do, they're setting the stage. I mean, we as farmers could be replaced pretty quick. Our relevance, Chris is probably going to talk about it. We're producing industrial products and feed. We need to be focusing on that food grade product or nutrient density, stuff like that. With that, I'm going to shut up. Appreciate the chance to be up here. And any question? I guess, are we taking questions or? It's 10 o'clock, I did good. So, thank you very much.
A lot of the trouble that we've had with the interseeded cover crops into the row crops is getting them to survive the shade. What varieties of plant varieties have you found to survive the best? I assume red clover and annual ryegrass, they're kind of the standards, but anything else work?
The question is finding seeds to survive the interseeding mix. And that's going to go back to that indicator plants. Be watching what does survive. For me, annual ryegrass is simple and easy. If you're not getting it to survive, though, chances are you're not going early enough. It's got to be strong enough and stable enough to survive the dormancy period. Now, as I drove up here yesterday, I know our corn is a lot taller in Iowa than the corn up here, so that's going to change your parameters a lot. You're going to have to figure some of this out. You're going to have to be the resident expert. Like I said, the simple starters is the annual ryegrasses, the clovers, the stuff. You can almost fly them on and it'll work if you get the right weather. I'm 100% drilling, because that can help us lower our seeding rates. Normally, I'd like to touch on all that stuff, but 45 minutes, we did the best we could. So, does that answer your question, or? Hairy vetch is an awesome one, but you got to be prepared for that. Some guys are like, oh my God, you better deed hairy vetch to the farm. I'm like, great, nobody's going to want to rep my farms. Buckwheat's the same way. Buckwheat's another easy one. Plus, you got the beneficial aspect. And
still have time.
got one right over here.
With a corn-on-corn rotation, do you see that your cover crops are fighting off the pathogens that you'd see from that overwintering debris, or have you seen problems with continuous corn, and considering pathogens?
Corn on corn with the interseed, are we seeing pathogens in that reduced? I'd say yes. For the simple fact of the matter, if we get the legume, the nitrogen ratios right, that's way above my pay grade. I just know if I put plenty in, I can burn residue up too fast. A lot of my cornfields look like whole plant silage in the spring if we don't do anything in the fall. Our residue is just burning up that fast. And, the only reason we might have stock butts left is because we leave them standing. I'm to the point I leave, Dwayne Beck will talk about it, long and tall. I'm not long and tall. We leave everything is standing as much as we can, but, it helped. The reason we're doing that then is it helps us to get some of our more finicky ones to overwinter easier. You keep that, snow covering that. But yes, if you can burn up the residue, you can do it. You can either till it in or you can burn it up on top. And, the legumes feed the nitrogen. And like I said, clover and hairy vetch is two of the best ones we've found. So.
Way in the back.
Can you envision transitioning to organic with your system, or are you too heavily relying upon sprays?
If I would go into my next section, we are we've been asked to help test some theories on the organic side. Our extreme plot this year was on the organics. There's a big target out there right now for organic no-till. And back when I talked about, we've got to have a hard plan. You start working with universities, and I don't want to condemn them, but a lot of times companies put equipment there without the knowledge how to run the equipment. And the big eye-opener I had this year is we were at a university running the test, and we showed up, I showed up for their field day, and where we tested was gone. They terminated, and it's like, well, your learning stopped the day you canceled the plot. My plot didn't look great, but we wrote it out. I knew, and it was late enough, I knew we weren't going to make harvest, so we did end up round baling mine, but, the corn almost hit black layer, and we were freezing. So, the simple fact, it went 3.5 bales an acre if anybody wants to know how we yielded. But I think we're getting close on that front. Will I personally go organics? Show me the money. I mean, I've got to make money at what I do, and if somebody pays me to do it, yes, we're getting close enough. I think we can. You know, that's part of why we're going with the in-row rolling. We were testing Dawn's row mow this year. Some of the other options coming, we're helping work on some of that. And the way we need to start looking at that is we've always talked herbicide, you know, using multiple modes of action on herbicide. We need to start looking at multiple modes of termination or suppression. Does that answer your question?
One more question for now. Is anyone? Yeah, right here. This guy. He knows a little.
Sweating bullets.
He knows how to ask questions.
Have you tried the stripper head on the wheat?
I don't have enough acres. I mean, I would love to try it. I've talked to Shelbourne some. The people I've talked to tell me if we put the blocker panel in where the soybean is, we'll get spillage and stuff like that.
Because one of the reasons we started stripper heads in the 80s is we were wanting to use them for our relay crop thing.
I mean, I would love to get where all our soybeans are with this. I know at one point Shelbourne was working on a stripper head for soybeans. I don't know why they dropped that.
Because it doesn't work.
I know, but I mean, I love the principle. You know, I would love to leave my soybean stubble 3 feet tall, but you know, the sad part is to this day we still have to run it all through the combine. And
There's a French model at one time that could do that. But
so
we can talk about what that looked like, but they spend too much time drinking wine.
they're good at that. And if you haven't been to France to taste the wine, you got to go. I've never been a wine connoisseur, but after last spring, I've drank more wine since last spring than ever. So you get quality, you get hooked. So with that, I'm done, I guess.
Right.
We'll be back this afternoon.
Thank you, Loran.